Welcome to Babylon Berlin Babble. My name's Bubba, and this week we're covering all of Babylon Berlin up to the end of Season 2. That is the end of the train car story. Spoiler alerts. If you haven't watched all of Babylon Berlin up to the end of Season 2, please pause the podcast, hop the train back to the beginning, and watch them all to catch up with us. Joining me this week, as they join me every week, are two wonderful double Ps.
Double Ps?
Perfect panelists. On my left is none other than somebody who always needs to wear a gas mask. It's Catfish. Catfish, how you doing?
I'm healthier than you, y'all. The gas mask comes in handy.
And on my right is somebody who loves hanging out, especially in chandeliers. It's Double M. How you doing?
Hallo, Deutsche, die nicht offens wollen.
Whoa, that's impressive. What did that mean?
That's terribly pronounced and poorly translated. It means hello to the Germans, the ones who never listen to us.
Oh, very good, very good. You know what? I've got to check the downloads. I don't think they're number one or number two. USA is number one, and I believe other English language countries like the UK and Canada might have more downloads than our friends over in the Deutschland. But any Germans listening to this, we see some of your stats too, and we love you guys. Please subscribe to the podcast at this minute. If you're in a place where you can leave a written review, like in Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, please write us a review or reach out to us on social media. You can find us, the Double P Media Crew, at Double P HQ on Twitter and Instagram. That's the word double, the single letter P, then the letters HQ for headquarters, at Double P HQ on Twitter and Instagram. Facebook.com/Double P HQ. Guys, we have done it. This has been a long train journey, but we have reached the end of Season 2, and it is time. That's right, folks. It is time to give our rankings for the train car storyline in this great television show. Great question mark. Let's see those ratings. Babylon Berlin. Double M, you have been generally positive the whole way through these final episodes of Season 2. What is your ranking out of 10 for these final 3 episodes?
Well, I'm going to go 9 out of 10, what I call double C's.
What?
Double C's?
That's chest compressions.
Oh.
Because, yeah, it made my heart stop 9 out of 10 times.
Man, that's pretty good. Did anybody revive you like they revived Charlotte?
Well, I don't know if I'm still alive or not, am I?
If you're on this podcast, most likely not.
Okay.
And you ended up in the bad place. All right, Catfish, you had started kind of rough. The beginning of Season 2 you really liked. What is your ranking out of 10 for these final 3 episodes of Season 2?
Well, first I need to explain my ranking system because there's some of these you didn't know. First, I was going to put it on the WW scale, the double W scale.
Wait, double W?
Double W's?
Yeah, wonderful Wolters.
Oh, boy.
Okay, because as we learned at the end of this, by the end of the second season, what is he? He's a lover. He loved Charlotte and satisfied her physically. He had a tearful goodbye with Mrs. Wolter when he thought he wasn't coming back. He's a hero. He shot his partner to save Rath from having to shoot his partner.
Oh, brother.
He's a teacher. He taught us the perils of smoking. And on television, he has the mark of having the largest ratio of belly size to lip size in the entire world of broadcasting.
Well, now
However,
that I
I
know
couldn't
the
give it to
scale,
him.
this is very interesting to see what your ranking out of 10 will be.
Well, but I couldn't make it Wonderful Walters because I had to make it 9 triple F sounds.
Triple F sounds?
sounds.
Yeah, Fiendish Fraulein Phantasms.
Whoa.
That is for Charlotte's. I gave it 9. I would have given it higher, but as I'm watching Charlotte clearly be dead, while checking IMDb to see that she has been in all episodes of the first 3 seasons of this show, I thought to myself, what the hell is going on here? It has to be a dream sequence. No, she's a ghost. She's a Fiendish Fraulein Phantasm.
Well, 9 out of 10, Catfish. This is your highest ranking ever. Tell us what's going on.
I don't think so. I thought I gave the last one like 9.23 or something.
I thought you were at 8.3 or something, but all right, sure.
It's a great finish. Pretty much everything is wrapped up except for who ends up with the gold. And we're going to speculate a little bit about that later. But I thought they wrapped up everything pretty well and set up some good things for the next season. So I think it was pretty good.
Wonderful. All right, guys. Listeners, I somewhat soft-powered my way to push my two buddies to watch this show just because I love it so much. And here we are at the end of the train car storyline. I am going to go really, really high. I'm going to give these final 3 episodes of Season 2 10, what I like to call double Bs out of 10.
Double
B's?
B's?
Bruno bits. Bruno Wolter has been blown to bits, and he shattered to the wind all podcasts long. However long we've been doing these podcasts, I've been talking about we need to get to the fireworks factory. And sure enough, Bruno Wolter gave us the fireworks in a big bang at the end. These 3 episodes, of the 3, why am I so high on them when, if you listen to the rest of this podcast, you're going to hear me pointing out flaws and groans and wait, what? How could I be 10 out of 10 when I know that it's quote-unquote not perfect? Mainly because that penultimate episode of Season 2, which featured, spoiler alerts, pause the podcast if you haven't already, which featured Charlotte's would-be death, plus the incredible, destroying end of Benda's life and Benda's daughter's life in the Greta versus the Nazis plot. It hit me so hard, I couldn't explain it. These shows, why do we get passionate about them? Why do we podcast about them? Because they make us feel stuff. And that episode made me feel so much, I couldn't believe it. Now, admittedly, I shouldn't have believed it because in the final episode, we find out that Charlotte is revived in a way that I'm still a bit conflicted about. The wonderful penultimate death was so strong, but when it happened, when I watched it the first time way back when, I kept thinking to myself, this show can't go on without her. She's the best thing in the show. So when she's revived in the final episode, even though it didn't feel believable, as a viewer, I was like, oh, thank God. 10 out of 10. Listeners, we always say, who cares what we think? We want to hear your ranking of the season and the series as a whole up to the end of Season 2. The train car storyline has gone kaboom. Once again, write to us on social media at PHQ on Twitter and Instagram, facebook.com/PHQ. Is anybody upset that I'm giving it 10 out of 10, even though I'm going to point out for the rest of this podcast all these little things that aren't perfect?
You know, that's why I couldn't give it in a show that has had, to me, it seems a lot of realism. And even though a lot of crazy things have gone on, it's all been tied together. I mean, I'm not a big fan of, as I've told you, and I'm still not a big fan, even with the reveal of the doctor and the drugs storyline. This was just a bridge too far for me. I appreciated the fact that it made Walter a tool of her rebirth, that he facilitated her new embracing of life. So I appreciated that, but I just thought it was too much. It was too long. Come on.
Listeners, we're going to be diving into all the twat. Listeners, we're going to be diving into all the plot twists and everything else in these final 3 episodes. And because it's the last episode that's going to be covering Season 1 and Season 2, we're going to bring back all the games we love to play here on Babylon Berlin Babble. And let's get to our first game right at the top. It's Who's the Worst?
It should be Who's the Wurst?
Very much so. Very good, Catfish. Now, listeners, if you didn't listen to that previous podcast, we listed a bunch of characters here on Babylon Berlin, and we tried to figure out who was the worst of all of them. And at that time, we came to the realization that Yannick's friend Rudy was the worst, because he had found out that Yannick had a crush on Charlotte, yet he still went and tried to make his moves and dance with her and steal her away from his buddy Yannick. But that was before some of the developments we got in Season 2. So it's time to find out who truly is the worst. And we're going to start off by having Rudy up against Greta. Greta, who fell victim, who was tricked, and who, even if she wasn't tricked, was planting a bomb to kill somebody at her employer's house, Police Chief Benda, R.I.P. Benda's house. So who is the worst? We'll go to you first, Double M. Rudy or Greta?
Greta for being so stupid as to fall for what she fell for.
Oh, you don't have any sympathy for her that she...
Oh, I do. She's a complete victim here, but there's a difference between arming an explosive and just stealing someone's wannabe girlfriend.
Well, we'll find out if there really is a difference by coming to you, Catfish. Who is the worst? Stealing somebody's crush, attempting to steal somebody's crush, or planting a bomb at your boss's office?
I mean, as much as I would like to joke here about the seriousness of being a bad wingman, Greta is the worst. Yeah, she got suckered so hard, and it was funny because I texted you as I was watching. It was like the first 3 minutes of that episode, and I texted you. I said, "Oh no, Fritz is alive." Mm-hmm. Because remember when I complained last time about how this storyline didn't seem to go anywhere for me. I was like, well, it seemed like they were going to use her to get in, but then Fritz died, and so what's going on? Well, this is what was going on. They had a master plan, and they suckered her. I mean, I feel bad for her, but I don't. She's evil.
Oh. Well, I'm glad you're seeing how cool Rudy is now, Catfish.
I mean, forget Rudy. Fritz, man, he's got all the moves.
Oh, brother. Oh, dear Lord. Okay, so Greta goes on to the next round. And so it's going to be Greta versus the Nazis, Fritz and Otto. Catfish, you mentioned it a second ago. I want to tip my cap to you. Every time we talked about the Greta storyline and her relationship with Fritz, you were pointing out the oddness with it in how when Fritz went over to the house to see Greta, he nodded to his friend Otto as he was walking in. And so that revealed that they were Nazis. And then Benda's daughter coming down to his office, that just destroyed me. As a television viewer, I loved being destroyed that way. It was so emotionally charged. And so I loved it. But now we got to figure out who is the worst, Greta or those imitation communists, true Nazis, Fritz and Otto. Catfish, you're up first. Who's the worst?
I think I said it. It's Greta.
Oh, what? I may have to strike your vote entirely.
I mean, if I'm allowed to vote, then I get to vote on who I want to vote for.
How in the world are you going to explain to our listeners how Greta is worse than these Nazis, Fritz and Otto?
You know what? Maybe they're just NITs, Nazis in training, and they haven't done anything yet. They haven't, as far as I know, Greta's killed 2 more.
I am editing this, listeners, so you do not hear what Catfish just said as a joke that many of you would not find funny. A few of you might, but we're going to edit that sentence entirely. Double M.
What did I say that was a lie? Tell me where I lied.
We will never mention that sentence ever again. Double M. Greta or the Nazis, Fritz and Otto? Who's the worst?
And remember, you can only answer one way.
I'd like to say that we should go back and follow the words of the great Obi-Wan Kenobi and say, who's the more foolish, the fool or the fool who follows him? And so, it would seem that my answer would be obvious, but I am going to go Fritz because he was the fool and Greta was just the fool that followed him.
I have so much sympathy for Greta. She did a terrible thing, as I keep mentioning, going along with this. Greta was the innocent person who, when we first meet her, she's broke. She's begging for work on the streets. We find out later she had had a C-section and obviously had a child. Who knows where that is? She had been heartbroken by some guy. So she meets another guy, and this guy turns out to be even worse. The worst. Fritz and his buddy Otto. You're not getting out of this either. Nazis, Fritz, and Otto are the worst. Oh, thank goodness that is finally cleared up. Oh, wait a minute. Because these games are supposed to be fun and talking about Nazis murdering people is not very fun. Let's end on a somehow obviously lighter note, and let's go to the mini-Wurst edition. We're going to figure out who's the worst between the youngsters on Babylon Berlin. We're going to talk about Helga's daughter, Rath's nephew, Moritz, who seems to really love guns and poking around in basements when he shouldn't, and seemingly being tricked by the Reichswehr members on what they're doing. So is he the worst, or is Charlotte's sister Tony the worst? Why is she the worst? Honestly, I can't figure out why you could say she's the worst. But I suppose you could say that...
Yeah, you ready?
Sure, yeah. Okay. We'll find out. Let's find out. This will probably be another edit, listeners. We apologize. Our Patreon members will hear the unedited takes. All right, Catfish. Who, between Moritz and Charlotte's younger sister, Tony, who is the mini-worst?
Well, it definitely has to be Tony.
Oh, brother.
Because she's got all these guys, they're out of work. You know, times are tough. And all she does is strut around the apartment flaunting her silkenware.
Listeners, you missed another Patreon member-only comment right there. But Catfish picked Tony. Double M. Double M, do you want to nominate who's the mini-worst between Moritz and Tony?
Well, I'd say Tony because she's not mini, really. She's nearly as tall as Charlotte already in season 2. However, I am going to go with Moritz simply because Tony doesn't really do anything except discover her mom's dead, go and tell her sister. You know, she doesn't do anything to indicate that she's a bad person.
Okay, I could see that. I suppose you could also say that Tony probably knows what her creepy oldest sister's brother-in-law and his buddies seem to be trying to do with her, and she doesn't report them to the cops like Rath or even her sister who works at the police department. But just like Greta, you gotta give people some slack and say that young Moritz, junior to Rath senior, you're the mini-worst of them all. Catfish, are you okay that our full who's the worst are the Nazis, Fritz and Otto, and that the mini-worst ended up being Moritz?
Considering Moritz did some snooping, which wasn't great, but then was totally cool with Wolter and didn't report anything to Rath, I would say I'm okay with him getting a little verbal spanking by this podcast.
Listeners, tell us, who do you think is the worst of the big characters and the mini-worst of the youngsters on Babylon Berlin? We'll come back at the end of season 3 and see if somebody has replaced the Nazis Fritz and Otto and the mini-worst Moritz. Guys, it's time for another game, a game we like to call Ja oder Nein. That's where I read a series of statements to our panelists and they tell me ja, they agree and why they agree, or Nein, they don't agree. We've got 9 questions here, and I mean the number 9, not 9. Gentlemen, are you ready to play Ja oder Nein?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go. Judges, set the clock. Question 1. Babylon Berlin jumped the shark by reviving Charlotte after she drowned. Ja oder Nein? Let's go to you first, Double M.
Well, I have a lot of arguments for this, so you might not have wanted me to place this first, but if you want to say that that is a bit unlikely, I will say yeah. However, I am really weighing down on the 9 side simply because the first attempts to deal with sudden cardiac arrests or heart attacks started in the mid-1700s in Amsterdam. There was a group of wealthy, civil-minded citizens that had an organized group called the Society for the Recovery of Drowned Persons. First mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, 1740. And Dr. George Kreil first reported a successful use of external chest compressions in human resuscitation in 1903. Now, granted, CPR didn't come into realistic effect until the 1960s, and it's been changed quite a lot. And I even checked, as a person who has to take CPR every year, I counted Rath's chest compressions. They were way off, but nobody really had any idea how to do any of that at that time. They were just guessing, more or less. And as an emergency personnel, he probably would have been trained as best he could, or at least be read about it. So he got lucky, but it wasn't something that jumped the shark.
Catfish, did they jump the shark by reviving Charlotte? Ja oder Nein?
Yeah, shark totally jumped here. Now listen, I mean, there was no need for it either. I mean, they could have put her in more peril. There's no. It's fine for her to be in peril, but for us to make us think she's dead and then revive her in that way was unnecessary and weird. It just really stuck out to me.
Okay.
And I'm glad that Double M provided us with some information about when those things were available. The only problem is that I think most people aren't aware of that. And so instead of thinking about her being revived, it doesn't matter whether it was available or not. Most of us are going to think that it wasn't, and it's just going to take us out of it, which is what happened to me.
Can I just add, though, Catfish, to try and convince you one last time?
Mm-hmm.
It was Charlotte's sacrifice. It was the fact that she knew that train needed to be stopped, and she took in the water herself. That was the real drama of all of that. So the payoff is how she got back was just fine with me because of the sacrifice she made. To me, that was the crux of that story right there.
I mean, to me, it was about how Wolter changed her life and provided her with a near-death opportunity.
Which she danced away later on in the episode at the end of the season.
Guys, to decide who wins this battle royale, Ja oder Nein, I do have to ask you, Matt, do you know how long somebody could be drowned and cardiac arresting like that and then be brought back? Is there a time limit on it?
There is generally an accepted limit that 7 minutes is the amount of time that a person has to be without oxygen. However,
okay,
it depends also on the water temperature. Remember, this is Germany. It's not ever very warm in Germany. And even though it's May, the waters are probably still quite cold. So it is feasible that she would have had some extended time there.
All right. Well, then, because of that, I'm going to rule in favor of Double M. 9. It didn't jump the shark at that moment. Question 2. Imagine that Babylon Berlin had ended with this, the 16th episode. Now, admittedly it didn't. It's going to continue on into season 3. But imagine the series had ended with this 16th episode. Would you have been satisfied with that kind of conclusion? Ja oder Nein? Catfish, you're up first.
I would say ja. Took out everything that I really cared about. I mean, again, there are some things going forward, but blissfully, I would have been happy to just be like, okay, it's over. I understood most of it, and now it's done.
Double M, would you have been happy if this 16th episode was the final episode of this series entirely? Ja oder Nein?
Well, if it's okay to agree with Catfish, I would definitely say yeah. All of the storylines were pretty much wrapped up. We got all the answers to any questions that we really had for the most part, and certainly would have been a better ending than certain series. So we can just fill in the blank with whatever series ending that you hate there, listeners. So I'm gonna have to agree with Catfish and say yeah.
Can't believe Double M would attack what's happening now so brutally by complaining about that final episode. So I'm going to rule in the opposite of 9. Let's go to question 3. And this is deep in conspiracy corner. Now, Benda's wife, remember, kept leaving and going to different places. And so Benda was often alone with Greta, the maid, and they would have their sausage and beer, secret dinners, and that kind of stuff. And so let's go to conspiracy corner for a bit. Mrs. Benda, the show tells us, is having an affair with this off-screen character, Dr. Hutton. Ja oder Nein? Double M, you're up first.
Oh, I have a big yeah on this one. I mean, this is one of my big, can we call it theories? She's going away, and her son complains to Greta that they get put into the garden while her and Dr. Hutton do exercises.
Oh, no.
I mean, this is definitely a yeah for me.
Catfish, secret affair. Ja oder Nein?
This reminds me, a lot of people don't know about it, but T. Corgesson Boyle wrote a fictionalized version of this, that the guy who developed Kellogg, who developed cornflakes and other cereals, also had some sort of weird, culty, come for the health and eat whatever, and then I'll sex you up kind of thing going on. And so, for real. And so I'm going to totally believe this. for sure. Benda gets a sausage, and so does Mrs. Benda.
Listeners, if you're upset that I didn't edit that out, please write to us at PHQ on Twitter and Instagram, facebook.com/PHQ.
And just remember, though, that was the cleanest and nicest of all the ones that were edited out.
Okay, we need to have some fun here, so let's have a more fun question. And we know the Drumpfs, a.k.a. Donald Trump, President Donald Trump's father, came to America. I know he opened some, I want to call them cat houses in Alaska and various places, but where did he get his money? So, off the board here, did Donald Trump's father end up with the infamous gold train? Ja oder nein? Catfish, what do you say?
I'm going to say for sure, unless he had some ability to make money that he didn't pass down to his son, then I'm going to say he needed to find his money just the way his son did. And so we all know a lot of rumors about Donald Trump, and I think the money made its way to Trump.
Double M.
Nein, how dare you talk about our president that way?
In the middle of a crisis, even. I'm going to agree with Catfish, yeah. Let's have one more fun one real quick. We saw Wolter give that emotional farewell to his wife, Mrs. Wolter. But she appears in the series an awful lot. She catches Rath when he's sneaking in, trying to get Yannick's notebook and everything. And we know that she's a hardcore drinker and smoker. But between the two, Wolter drinks and smokes more than his wife. Would you agree that's true? Ja oder nein, double M?
Oh, nine. I think that she has all day to do all of those things, and that's generally why when we saw at the beginning of the series, when he would come home, she'd be all spaced out. I'm pretty sure that's why.
Catfish, ja oder nein?
Oh, I say 9. Mrs. Wolter has got it on him. I mean, he's going out. You know, he doesn't have that much money as a crooked cop, but he's going out to the clubs and stuff, and it costs more money. But I say Mrs. Wolter is getting it done at home at a fraction of the cost.
The drinks at the Mocha FD aren't cheap, so Wolter probably doesn't drink as much. I'm going to vote Ms. Wolter 9 as well. Guys, let's get back to some seriousness. Let's get back to some plot, and a plot which here in the second half of season 2 really kind of took a back seat for a bit. The infamous gold on the train car, which was the running storyline across both seasons. It ends, in a lot of ways, in Paris. In Ja or Nein, the audience should assume that Kardakov killed Svetlana in her dressing room, there when it cuts away from them. Kardakov has been shot by Svetlana. She betrayed him to the Stalinists multiple times. She is the reason why all those Trotsky communists got killed. So, should we assume that Kardakov is there in Svetlana's dressing room in Paris to kill her, and that once it cuts away, he does kill her? Ja oder nein? Catfish, what do you got?
Of course he killed her. She's gone.
Double M.
So that was a ja, I guess, Catfish?
Yeah, that was a ja. Ja from Catfish.
That was a ja. Well, I'm definitely going 9, and here's why. Yeah, that last shot of the train car, there's a little plaque on it that says it's Paris bound. It's got a little marker on it that says Paris on it.
Mm-hmm.
So we know it's going to Svetlana. I say that Svetlana and Kardakov planned everything, down to their struggle in her own apartment, just to fool everybody so that they could run away with the gold. Kardakov was never a Trotsky supporter. He was only doing that so that he could use the resources to get everything in. Him and her were working in tandem together the whole time. The last look that they gave was a knowing look. Not a smile, not a victorious look, but a knowing look. But that wasn't because she knew he was going to kill him. It was because they realized they had been successful.
I mean, I thought we were supposed to be taking this podcast seriously, Bubba.
I agree, Double M. She shot him in the chest. Now his little notebook stopped the bullet. But
where the book was, which she would know him so well exactly. She would know exactly where the book was.
Yeah. He's going there. I love it. Okay, guys,
All right.
let's question 7. Let's talk about these villains on the show. We've got a bunch that are terrible. We already talked about Fritz and Otto, the Nazis. Let's try to forget them for a bit. But let's talk about some of the villains you could grow to love. Question 7. The most likable villain on this show is a guy we like to call Strawberry Face. The birthmark on his face, Neeson. Ja oder Nein? Double M, you're up first.
Ooh, see, that's difficult for me to answer having seen season 3. So just with season 2 in mind, I'm going to say 9.
Huh.
I actually, and Catfish will love this, but I actually liked Wolter right up until about episode 14.
And so you say Wolter is the most likable of them. He does like to laugh. After he's been in a brawl, he did have a good attitude. He did do positive things in addition to his negative things. So you're giving it to Wolter over Strawberry Face Neeson. Catfish, is Neeson the most likable villain on the show? Ja oder Nein?
I'm going to say 9 as well. I'm not going to say it's Walter because the premise is faulty. He's not a villain. But I am going to say that the most likable villain on the show, the most interesting villain, the guy that I can kind of get behind, even though he's done some horrible things, is the mobster, the Armenian. I mean, Neeson is a horrible human being. I haven't seen season 3. I'm excited to start it, so I don't know what he's going to do in season 3. But he's not a likable villain, whereas the Armenian is.
This is just my own personal opinion, but I'm going to go with Catfish on this one. And one of the reasons why, based on these episodes, I do find the Armenian a bit likable is, number one, he really, kills very sparingly. He'd prefer to do other things. And he's also almost calculating. He's smart in his calculations. When he has kidnapped Charlotte, terrible, and done all these terrible things to her, though, he lets her go. And why is he willing to let somebody go who he had kidnapped and could go to the police and isn't working at the police and all this stuff? That scene with Charlotte's little sister Tony at the table where he's like, it's no problem. We know where you live. And he's saying that out loud to a sentence with Tony, but also letting Charlotte know, hey, guess what? You do anything wrong, we know where you live. I love the smarts of him. So I am going to go with Catfish. I think the Armenian is the most likable villain on the show. And when we first met him, he was feeding some alcohol supplier his brother's tug.
Hang on.
That was implied. I'm not sure whether he actually did it or not.
But I think the most important thing to examine about that whole thing is, what was he feeding Tony?
Oh, no. If it was her brother-in-law's tongue, I hate that jerk. Good work, Armenian. All right. Question 8. Svetlana, there at her apartment in Berlin, kept that painting of the Sorokin family picture, even though she's not in it because she wasn't a member of the family. But having that picture allowed everyone to assume she was in it, that she was the character in the dress, even though it was a christening dress and it was a boy. And that proves Svetlana is smart. Ja oder Nein? Catfish, what do you say?
I'm going to say 9. It is not smart to have a family photo around. A family painting that has every conceivable child that could be in that family, and you are not in it. It was sort of a little bit of a Deus Ex Machina, in fact, used for Rath and Charlotte to not only know that she wasn't in the family, but also it had the gold train car on it. So it was a little bit of it was a little unsubtle. Let's just say that. The painting.
Catfish, do you think they went to the artist and said, oh yeah, we'll just pose like this in front of our ship, in front of our train smelting yard?
I mean, it was a surprising choice.
Double M.
Oh, I'm going to say for sure. I'm going to say because obviously this was something for her to remind her where she came from. Secondly, where's the best place to hide something? Right under your nose.
Very good. And that's actually pretty convincing for me, Double M, but I'm going to have this be a push. Listeners, you decide who is right. Catfish with his 9 or Double M with his ja. Once again, at Double PHQ on Twitter and Instagram, Facebook.com/Double PHQ. All right, guys, we're getting near the end of these games. You ready? After the events of the show that we've seen in Season 1 and Season 2, the Weimar Republic has got its feet underneath it, and the country will have smooth sailing from here on out. Ja oder Nein? Double M, what do you think?
I mean, come on. Nazis. Nazis are even in this season. So nine. They're already causing trouble. We know that now it was the Nazis who was behind the Benda killing, a stabilizing figure in this Weimar Republic. So 9.
Oh, yeah, sure. He was a nice guy.
How about you, Catfish? Ja oder Nein?
Yeah, no, I somehow, even although everything seems like it's all worked out for the good, my sixth sense is that things are still going to be trending downwards.
You guys are so negative. Come on.
Well, give us a ja.
No, sorry. 9 wins that one. Okay, guys, we got one last question here in the game, and it's another silly, fun one, but one that I see people talking about every time they mention Babylon Berlin. So question 10. While Nazis, the Reichswehr, Stalinists, and mobsters are dangerous, the most dangerous thing on Babylon Berlin are the elevators in the police headquarters. Ja oder Nein? Catfish.
Well, I have to say, first of all, it wasn't until they had probably kind of had to hit me over the head with it. I probably saw it a few times until I realized, like, that is freaking cool. Why bother having to call it to a certain floor? They just keep going. They're very slow. You hop on and hop off. You're never going to get stuck. You're never going to have to use a phone to call somebody. I think they're great. And I think that not only are they not dangerous, I say 9. I say bring them back.
Are the elevators the most dangerous thing in Babylon Berlin? Ja oder Nein, double M.
I have to give a definitive ja. First of all, the article that you gave us, Bubba, to read on this was fascinating. I loved the article. Secondly, I've been to Germany a couple of times, and I've actually seen one of those. No way did I have the nerve to hop on it.
If I could just step back here, maybe I didn't provide, I provided reasons why it was cool, but I didn't give you the option. The most dangerous thing on Babylon Berlin is Mrs. Elizabeth's chin. If you get anywhere near that thing, you could get cut with it.
Oh, my Lord. Woo. There go all our downloads in the Deutschland. Strong German features, everybody. Listeners, I'm going to tweet out or put in the notes some of the articles about these elevators, these Paternoster lifts. And Babylon Berlin films in one that is still in operation in Berlin. Germany has had a big fight about governments wanting to shut these down. Some people call them the death elevators. But seeing it, gosh, Catfish, you and I have been to Germany. Don't you wish we had seen one of these and we could have hopped on when we were there?
Man, for sure. I would have gone on in a heartbeat.
No. Not when you hear them.
Oh, no.
Oh. They don't sound noisy on the show.
The seeing is like, oh, yeah, I can make that jump. It's just like doing an escalator. The hearing them is a whole other story.
9. Before we play some of our final game, let's just cover these storylines a bit and see if there's anything that we've left off that our panelists want to talk about. One thing we really haven't talked about much here in the podcast is Operation Prangertag, where it tries to assassinate this French foreign minister and the German foreign minister, but Rath helps foil the plot. But in the end, all season long, we've been following this Reichswehr try to gain power, try to overthrow the government, yet here it is, German President Hindenburg lets them all off scot-free. How did you guys feel about that scene in the theater, Mac the Knife ringing in everybody's ear at Threepenny Opera, and the tenseness of that scene? What did you guys feel about the tenseness of that scene versus the, what I like to call, very Wire-esque ending of the story, where a great many criminals get off scot-free? What'd you think, Catfish?
Yeah, no, I thought it was very cool. I didn't think that he was going to be able to that Rath was going to be able to. I mean, he kind of superheroes his way through this thing, right? Getting in and getting there, and I thought they were going to pull it off. Now, obviously, I think if any people who were Germans were watching, they would know that wasn't going to happen unless Babylon Berlin was going to Quentin Tarantino this whole thing. But I found it to be very exciting. It was very sad when the guy came in and it's like, nah, I think we're just going to shut this down. And then Benda was like, kept telling Rath, that's it. We lost. We're screwed. Now, I mean, maybe it could have been set up a little bit better. I mean, this guy comes in. It's a little Deus Ex Machina where it's just like all of a sudden he shows up and boom, it's done. Maybe the hints were there a little bit earlier and I just didn't pick up on it because there were so many things going on. But it didn't feel like there was the fear that this could get shut down at that level. And so for us to be worried about all the different other kind of things and then out of nowhere, this is the thing that kills it, was again, like Charlotte's rebirth, it felt a little bit like a cheat to me. So, I wonder what you guys' feelings are about that.
It didn't feel like a cheat to me. If anybody's seen the great HBO show The Wire, some of this bureaucracy can destroy good cases that the cops come up with, can let criminals go free. And so that really reminded me of a Wire-esque ending to a story.
Well, it's true, except that with The Wire, you understand, in each case, you understand what's happening. It's either inertia or it's just the system is too hard. And here I didn't understand. Was he on their side? I didn't understand why he did it. So if the reason to me was clear, I could have bought it. But I'm like, okay, shut it down. I don't know why. Do you understand that?
Yeah, sure. Well, in The Wire, we would have spent time around President Hindenburg to better see why he would come through. Here on Babylon Berlin, it's just we know that Colonel Wendt has always been introduced as a partner and a higher up in the government. And so when President Hindenburg walks in with the guy I like to call Scarface because he's got that scar on his chin.
Right, as soon as he walked in with him, I was like, oh, shoot.
Double M, how did you feel?
Catfish, I totally agree with you. This is the second time watching it, and for me, and nary a place did I see any clues that would hint to this happening. So from that respect, it was kind of out of the blue. There was no build-up in that way. However, I wasn't disappointed by it. I really liked it. I just have to say to our viewers, there has to be some kind of reasoning behind this, be it political, be it socioeconomic, I don't know. But there has to be a reason for it because you don't just do that unless you perceive it to be the lesser of maybe two evils.
Great points, guys. Let's go to another point in the story that we really haven't talked about too much, and that is the end. We've talked an awful lot about Charlotte being resurrected after Wolter drives her and Rath off the road and into the water, but we haven't talked too much about the end, where it all really comes together, where Rath and his partners jump on the train, and then the train stopped by the Reichswehr, and then the Reichswehr stopped by the Armenians mobsters, and then we get into what feels like another Mission Impossible action set piece of Wolter stealing the train, and then him and Rath fighting on the top of the train, ending up in the Big Bang. How did you guys feel about the culmination of the train car storyline? Let's go to you first this time, Double M. What do you think?
Well, I love the juxtaposition of it. It's like, oh, these guys have the train car. No, now these guys have the train car. No, now this guy has the train car. It's like the back and forth to me was great. Again, how likely is it that a character like Rath would be able to fight a character like Wolter on the top of a moving train? Not certain. However, I loved the drama of it. I loved the ironic ending of it for Wolter. Sorry, Catfish. I just totally loved it. So I was quite pleased with the way it all went down.
Catfish, what do you think?
I mean, first of all, there's no reason to apologize to me. Wolter goes out in a blaze of glory. Small men have small deaths and big men have huge deaths. Wolter got the best death on the show. Well deserved. Like Double M, I loved the back and forth. The we've got it, they've got it, they've got it. I loved the Tweedledum and Tweedledee using the fake gas. That was super smart.
Oh yeah.
I kind of don't. It's at this point where I start to wonder a little bit about the Armenian letting so many things slide, and not at a certain point going, okay, you know what, Rath, you have fucked me over like 12 times now, and so I'm going to kill you. Like, I got a rep. I can't keep getting fooled like this. But I loved it. Also, it did feel, it's sort of turning things on its head. It is a little funny to have this huge action sequence between a guy who clearly can't run because he's not healthy and another guy who, between the shakes and now what appears to be serious heroin use, it doesn't seem like these are the two of the strongest people to go up against each other. But I did think it was cool. The whole thing about the gold being fake and then the gold being the train. I did figure out before they figured out that the train was the gold. I thought it was cool.
I always talk about, when we talk about this gold, in my head, it always reminds me of bits of the Maltese Falcon, at least when we find out the fake gold inside is just coal. That really reminds me of the classic noir film, The Maltese Falcon. And even though this is set in the 1920s, this is very much a noir show, and I did really like that.
Well, also, you say The Maltese Falcon, but of course it also reminds me of Double Indemnity, which is my favorite noir because of the train setting.
Not my genre.
Oh, really? But you still like the show. That's good.
Yeah.
All right, guys. I'm not sure there's anything else to talk about in the Charlotte Gets Fooled plotline, but I do just want to give it up to these filmmakers for really ratcheting up the tension of when is Benda going to open that drawer? Oh, no, his daughter's there. Now his daughter's underneath the desk. I thought that was great. Of course, it devastated me, but in a good way because it showed me how much I liked these characters, how much I had grown to like Benda. And so did you guys have any other thoughts about this plotline, which ends with, of course, Greta arrested and the killing and bombing of the Benda house? It's blamed on the communists wanting revenge for the May Day protest. Oh, what did you think, Double M?
Well, it checks all of the boxes for the Nazis, doesn't it? They get rid of the liberal guy. They get rid of the communists. Now the communists are being pursued in a way, and right down to, of course, Rath later on testifying against them. And who's in there but the extra guy in the Black Reichswehr now in that position to offer him that new position where in the end he justifies Wolter's statement, right, Catfish? It all is turning up roses for the Nazis, even though I'm not sure that Wendt is actually part to that. But I do feel like that everything is played into the Nazis' hands. So I thought it was really compelling, just like you, Bubba. Man, that scene and even the ending of that episode where they played a lot of beautiful piano piece by Grieg. And you think about Benda, how he would play the piano there in their home and everything. It was just totally unsettling.
Oh, yeah. Seeing that guy, and it's a character we've referred to before, Scarface, Colonel Wendt, in Benda's office and saying, you get this place fumigated. Dear God, this really is a terrible ending. Catfish, any other thoughts on R.I.P. Benda and Benda's daughter?
It is. He's talking about what is the worst. Is the verse that the daughter died, or then when the guy takes over, he talks about getting fumigated? It's all just horrible.
And this, in some ways, gets us to setting up for season 3, which we'll be covering in a bit. This character, Colonel Wendt, with the scar on his face, which back then, believe it or not, I did some research on the scar. Back then, it was like a sign of nobility, meaning you had been doing fencing and you had a cut like that on your face. But Colonel Wendt has Benda's job. He pitches to Rath a position on internal affairs, with Rath kind of being the informal leader of it, which we assume leads to Rath really doing what I think is a terrible thing and lying about the May Day riots. Some positives. Charlotte's become a cop. That's good, right?
Yay, yeah.
One thing we haven't talked too much about is Helga's little mini arc in these last 3 episodes. Neeson, who has been kicked out of the board, old Strawberry Face. He's got one position left, and that's to oversee this fund for widows and fallen heroes of World War I. And he gives a speech in a church, and we see Miss Elizabeth there because she's a widow, and we see Helga and Moritz there. And Helga snaps at him and says, listen, your company, Neeson, built these weapons. Neeson seemingly tries to get on her good side, and we end with him inviting her to lunch out at his impressive Neeson manor. Any thoughts on where this might go, Catfish?
I mean, it's interesting. We already have one kind of love triangle with Charlotte and Rath and the widow. Are we gonna have widow, Rath, and Neeson? It's kind of interesting.
It's kind of square.
It's a square now. I mean, another thing we didn't talk about was one of my favorite parts of one of these last episodes is when, speaking of getting into duels, Buddha gets double glove slapped in his own office.
Yep, old Zorjabel. That Zorjabel, not Buddha. They're both old, bald German guys. But yeah, Zorjabel, he takes it on the chin, literally.
The guy just comes in, whack, whack. What did I tell you?
Love it.
So, quick question real quick, as long as we're on the Helga subject.
Yeah.
Are we to assume that she's some kind of trained nurse? Is that why there was talk of, now I can do whatever, wherever I want, and she was the one who administered the watered-down heroin to Rath?
Well, that is a great thought. I mean, what would she have done while her husband and the father of her child, we assume, were out in World War I, is, stay home and help repair the people. We assume she had done that, or that's what I assume. What do you think?
That was kind of what I was led to. But I just wanted to see if I was putting things in my mind like I do about Sveta and Kardakov.
Either that or she's a vet.
Yeah, that's more likely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and somebody who's been beaten like a dog is Neeson, so they'll have a great time there at lunch.
Oh, ouch.
And of course, speaking of Helga, it gets to the final reveal, the final twist in all of this. Right when Rath is being attacked by the German communists because he lied about the May Day riots, he's saved by the Armenian, saved in quotes, who brings him back to Dr. Schmidt's. And Rath is being hypnotized. Dr. Schmidt claims he will take Rath back to his fear. Dr. Schmidt is describing the battle where Rath's older brother died, so if you're truly paying attention, you might be thinking, wait, what's going on? How does this guy know it? Through this, we see what I believe is the truth. Gary and Rath didn't run out to save his brother and bring him back and then get captured by the French. He just left his brother then. He ran. And in the ultimate kick of the pants, the ultimate twist and reveal, why has the Armenian not killed Rath? Because the Armenian and Dr. Schmidt are aligned, and Dr. Schmidt is Rath's older brother, Anno. Helga's husband, we assume Moritz's father. Catfish, you didn't feel like you liked this. I actually loved it. I thought it was like, oh my God, this is incredible. But you didn't like it, so I'm going to let you go first. Any thoughts about Dr. Schmidt being Rath's older brother lost in the war?
Well, what I didn't like about this in season 1 was because I didn't understand what this was at all. And then by the end of season 2, I understand still not what he's doing, really, but that he's Rath's brother. And so I guess I can't complain if I assume at some point in the series they're going to explain why the Armenian and Anno are in league together and why Anno is important to the Armenian. I guess I'm not supposed to complain that after 16 episodes I still don't know why they are. So, I mean, would it be unseemly of me to complain that at this point I don't know what they're doing?
Double M, what's your take on that?
This last thing was extremely emotional for me, even as emotional as thinking that Charlotte had died. I absolutely loved it, not just because of learning the truth about what Rath did, but it clarified so many things for me. First of all, there was no gas used at that battle. Garian's trauma is truly just a PSD type trauma, as his brother, now that we know is Dr. Schmidt, had tried to explain in that conference area. Because if there was gas being used, then Anno would not be alive. He wouldn't have survived it. So there was no gas. It was just a trauma, and it was the trauma of leaving his brother behind that caused his PSTD episodes. The fact that, and this was the part that just really got me, not only it explains why the Armenian was not killing Rath over and over and over again, because Schmidt was telling him, he's like, no, that's my brother. You can't do that. And secondly, when Dr. Schmidt, when Anno is the first to make the move and hug Rath, that moment of seeming forgiveness and seeing, it was the best acting moment to me that actor did in the whole 16 episodes. The actor whose name I can't remember that played Garion. But just the release of all of that just totally impacted me. And then it flowed right into, again, you know, I'm a musical guy, so it flowed right into the end credits, and we had this wonderfully resolved piece of music, except for Sveta's Zuasha Zustab just being done in voice rather than with the music that goes along with it. Tom Tykwer did a magnificent job putting everything together in these last few moments of this series. It was one of those things that just made me instantly go to season 3. I could not wait a second. Catfish, I can't believe that you've been able to hold off this long.
Well, I wanted to be true to my job here, which was to keep you suckers honest.
Catfish, you're doing a great job. Thank you for holding out. The characters who are surviving to cause trouble and fight trouble in Season 3, let's go through them real quick. We've got the cops. Rath, Charlotte, Graf, the crime scene photographer, Rath's 2 underlings, we like to call Tweedledee and Tweedledum, Police Chief Zorjabel, new political police chief Colonel Wendt, the mustache murder detective Baum, and sure enough, the murder chief, Buddha Ganat. We've got the mobsters, the Armenian and Dr. Anno Rath Schmidt. We've got the far-right nationalist figures like Neeson and Whitebeard Seegers. We've got the Nazis in Fritz and Otto, the new Rath family of Helga and Moritz. We've got the Ritter family still. We've got little sister Tony, creepy older sister, and her brother-in-law. Plus, we've got Greta still, Miss Elizabeth, Kettelbach, the journalist, the German communist doctor, Benda's widow. They're all going to be popping up, and even a few surprises into Season 3. Before we talk more about Season 3 and give out our awards for Season 2, everybody knows that the music is an important part of this show, and for our musical expertise, we go to Double M. Double M, do you want to talk about this great ending score?
Yeah, I've already spoken a lot about some of the stuff, so I'll not rehash any of that, but during the sequence when the assassination tip was going on, the Operation Prongertag, there was a piece that was featured during that episode excessively. And we'd heard snippets of it before, but we really heard it just centrally used in that particular episode. And it's a great piece. It's got all of these dissonances to resonances to dissonances that really build the tension that helped. I'll just play a little bit here on the melodica. That just helped really build the tension. That's a master stroke, and it's a long piece. It's on the official soundtrack, track 9. It's like 6 minutes and 32 seconds long. And Tykwer actually took Klimek's piece and he broke it up and used different parts of it in different places, which was brilliant. And I totally loved that was done. The second thing in the last episode that I wanted to talk about was Sveta's encore. And here we go. Now, as if I've had to pronounce German, now I have to try to attempt to pronounce Russian. So, Russian listeners, if you're outnumbering the German listeners, please excuse this. Sumarus Vasarnop. It comes from Latvian. It was composed by Rizoa Serzeros, and it was, in this case, performed by the actress Severija. And the translation of that piece is Gloomy Sunday. But there's a really neat story that goes along with this song that explains why Sveta cut her throat. And this song has a legend to it, the legend of Gloomy Sunday, and it was nicknamed the Suicide Song. And the legend behind this song is that if you listen to it, you would soon commit suicide after listening to it. And the legend gained attention because it became connected with a rash of suicides in Hungary. And the composer and his wife and hundreds of other people committed suicide allegedly soon after listening to the recording of this song. And it was banned in 1936. The problem that I have with it being used is because it hadn't been composed until 1933. There's another Matt's tomato. But nonetheless, it was certainly effective and certainly beautiful. And so I don't feel like that Sveta was trying to throw Kardakov off the trail so much as she was just doing the full act and saying, I've performed this song, now I must commit suicide, and that's why the fake suicide by her at the end of it. The piece is disturbing and haunting. Again, look up SZOMURU and then maybe do the composer as well, REZSOE. Again, Sumaru Vesarnup and Rizoa Cesaris. Sorry for the mispronunciation of those, but look it up on YouTube, and the original version is every bit as haunting, but this version was just stunning and beautiful.
Matt, I love those pronunciations. I am a bit scared to encourage people to listen to Gloomy Sunday, the suicide song, while we're stuck in the coronavirus.
Good point. We probably shouldn't do that. After we've long surpassed this whole bit and you're not locked up where you can't get out and get away from these thoughts, then go listen to it. That would probably be better. I already mentioned the lyric pieces by Edvard Grieg, the Norwegian composer. That was used at the end of episode 15 for the credits after the explosion happened at the Benda house. And it was a little bit of a strange choice because it's not necessarily as doom and gloom as you would think it should be, but it was definitely a nice tribute to the death of a guy who was playing the piano all the time at his home and played the organ at church as well. I love that they used that instead of just the regular whatever they were going to use for the end credits. That's all my music.
Thank you so much, Double M. Catfish, any thoughts? This is always so informative. This is great, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. You got to have it. And I know that now that we've passed this, now that Double M will be listening to Mac the Knife every day to make up for not hearing it on the show.
Yeah, the funny thing is that I used to play with a band called Big Bamboo back in my old performing St. Louis days. We played every Tuesday at the Broadway Oyster Bar. Anybody who knows me from podcasting will know all about the Broadway Oyster Bar. But used to play there every Tuesday, and it was one of our featured pieces. Our lead singer, we would play it through about 4 or 5 different keys, just ascending up each time it was done, ascending up by a half step. If I never hear Mac the Knife again, it'll be too soon.
Listeners, I'm going to give you guys, if you want to, we're all in quarantine when we're recording this podcast. I'm going to give you some homework. In season 3, I always mentioned how season 1 and 2 dealt with the train car storyline. Well, season 3 is a complete 12 episodes, one storyline. In the new framework, we've lost the gold on the train car and we're replacing it with the German film set. So the German films of 1920 are infamous for German expressionist filmmaking.
Not just the ones that starred Rath's father.
So during 14 years of the Weimar Republic, an average of 250 films were being produced each year.
No way.
Right. And so this German expressionist films, there are some classics like The Cabinet of Dr.
Caligari?
Yes, that's what I said. There's Nosferatu. There's Metropolis, the German expressionist science fiction drama, which was produced at this studio in Germany called Studio Babelsberg, where Babylon Berlin is currently being produced. And there's The Blue Angel, which was the first German talkie, and it's the film that made an international superstar of its lead actress, Marlene Dietrich. So if that interests you at all, check out one of those German films from the 20s. Or watch it and then say, Nein.
Bubba, if I could just add, if you truly want to appreciate the fact of when talkies came into Germany, just prior to recording this podcast, I went on Amazon Prime for free. I watched Nosferatu from 1922. And let me tell you something. Yeah. Yes, it is a silent film. And let me tell you that you will definitely learn to appreciate dialogue being spoken on speakers as opposed to with the eyebrows. I'm not kidding. The most expressive and biggest, bushiest eyebrows I've ever seen on film ever.
Catfish, I know you love eye work in acting.
Well, I mean, and that's why whenever I had an audition, I'd have you coach me, because eye work is your specialty.
Thank you. That's now in recorded history. Guys, we're going to end this podcast talking season 2 the way we end every podcast here on Babylon Berlin Babble, by giving out some awards. The first award we always give out is our Wolter of the Week. That's someone who's living the high life like Wolter, somebody who blew up real big and they inspire us. It could be a character on the show, it could be a person in real life, it could be an idea. Let's go to you first, Double M. Who is your Wolter of the Week?
Well, I have to remain consistent and stay real world. And this time around, my Wolter of the Week is Mr. Peter Levine from New York. Because just as Wolter was willing to leave a car behind, I mean, granted it was in a lake, but never mind that, he left the car behind, and he left and its occupants in potential trouble. He just went on with his life from there. He had to get that train. So, too, the New York Post reports that Peter Levine packed a car for his son, Matt Levine, to use when Matt returned from spring break. Would not allow him back into their house for fear of the coronavirus. So it's like, take the car, leave the car, don't come in. I've got to go on with my life. And at least Peter did leave Matt like $300 and some groceries, but Wolter didn't leave anything for Rath and Charlotte, I don't suppose.
Very
Except
good
for
Wolter
a newfound appreciation of life.
Well, for my Wolter of the Week, I always remember that scene very early on in season 1 where Wolter has just blackmailed sweet innocent Charlotte in the sex dungeon into sex, and he's nude and he's sitting back and he's really just living the high life. And so to honor that, my Wolter of the Week is David Geffen. David Geffen, here we are in the coronavirus quarantine time. He tweeted out a picture of his $1 billion yacht that he's on. It's only worth $200 million. And he's like, hey, I'm self-quarantined, I'm social distancing. What a son of a gun. What a true Wolter. Living the high life. David Geffen, media mogul David Geffen, my Wolter of the Week. We have to go to our Wolter lover. He has loved him across season 1. He's loved him across season 2. The one with the Wolter in all of us. It's Catfish. Catfish, the final award for season 2. Who you giving it to?
Well, now that I don't have Wolter around anymore, and I like to keep this fictional because the real world is just too horrible for me right now, I was going to go with Moritz because he likes to stick his nose in where it's not belong, and he gets into a lot of trouble. But then I thought, God knows what's going to happen to Moritz in the future. He could become horrible, and then it'll be trouble. So I decided the safest Wolter of the week was once again Wolter, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, God, he sweeps the award every week.
He sweeps it. He, once again, what I said, he's a poet, he's a scholar, he's a gentleman, he's a lover, he's a teacher, and he went out in the blaze of glory that he deserved. Wolter, you're on fire, my friend, and your ashes have spread out all across the German countryside for us.
Yes, everybody in that area has a little bit of Wolter in them, in their lungs. Now we give out one other award here on the Babylon Berlin Babble podcast, and that's our Sweet Scheisse of the Week. This award was graded when Catfish saw lovely Charlotte Lotte in her sex dungeon leather outfit, and he went, Sweet Scheisse! So we give that to the person who, or characters or real world things that make us exclaim out, Sweet Scheisse. Catfish, you created this award. Who are you going to give it to this week?
Well, as we all know, last podcast, I gave my Sweet Scheisse award to Neeson's mom, who crushed him at the board meeting and then led the rest of the board in a sarcastic slow clap for the ages. This week, I give it to Rath's sister-in-law / lover for dunking on Neeson. He got dunked on by a war widow at church. And so I said to myself, sweet Scheisse, I love it when Neeson gets punked.
Man, but this is becoming the Neeson Dunk of the Week award. Double M, do you have a nominee for the sweet Scheisse of the week?
Yeah, Bubba, I have to go back to the first time that I watched this series as opposed to this time around. And I remember that I was completely surprised when I saw those form-fitting uniforms and those hats and that red armband with the swastika on it. And I saw that it was Otto and Fritz, and I said, sweet Scheisse, they're not dead. I was shocked and strangely aroused.
Those SOBs, Fritz
Whoa.
and Otto, the first.
Now I've got a new sweet Scheisse of the week when I found out that Double M was strangely aroused.
Well, from my sweet Scheisse of the week, I feel like it has to go to Charlotte. You go online and you find those people here in the English-speaking world who have watched this show, Babylon Berlin. And you know what they are? They are shippers. They are shippers for Rath and Charlotte. And one of the many plots we haven't talked about is Charlotte has been saved. She goes to the hospital to see how Rath is doing. And of course, she goes there, and what does she see? She sees Rath with his lady Helga and Moritz, and she goes away. Many people want those two crazy kids, Rath and Charlotte, to end up together. Let's go to the ship scale. How are you guys feeling about the ship of Rath and Charlotte, if it's not meant to be? Catfish, what do you think?
I mean, I put him on the 2-ship scale. She deserves somebody a lot better, and since we just recently lost her potential best partner,
Oh, brother.
Wolter, I don't see anybody on the show that deserves her right now. I can't find anybody. But Rath is horrible. He's a mess. He's a drug user. And he's a slut. She deserves somebody better.
Double M, how are you feeling about the seemingly unresolvable Rath and Charlotte ship?
It's just one of those things that just keeps twisting and turning, much like the rest of Charlotte's life. Think about the week that poor girl had. She had to find out that he was with Helga, and she had to also sit with Jannika's poor parents as they congratulated her. That was one of the most heartbreaking scenes. You know, it's just one of those things where it's like, how can it get any worse for a girl who deserves so much more? And I still kind of ship Rath and Charlotte, and just in hopes that maybe she can change Rath. We'll have to see.
There is some good news for Charlotte, boys. Do you know what it is?
What's that?
I'm single.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy. Well, I will say this, Bubba. You and I have been to Amsterdam, and you shied away from the more exotic offerings. I don't think you're ready for Charlotte.
You're right. I'm not ready for the basement there of the Mocha FT. Listeners, we have been silly. Hopefully you've enjoyed these podcasts. Once again, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. Share them with your friends who you are watching Babylon Berlin with, and join us as we journey into Season 3. Currently, our podcast schedule is going to look like this. We're going to do a pod after the first 3 episodes of Season 3. Then we're going to do a second pod after Episode 7. So the first pod covering the first 3 episodes of Season 3, the next pod covering up to Episode 7 of Season 3, and then a final podcast covering it all. Once again, listen, subscribe, rate, review. We need you to join us on this train, because this train's filled with gold, I tell you.
Good.
It's made of gold.
This train is made of gold. Thank you, Double M. Double M, how can people find you on social media?
You can find me at Musical Concepts. No German needed to conspire. Tweet with me.
Catfish.
You can hit me up at CJGman67 on Twitter.
My name's Bubba. You can find me on Twitter at Fit and Trim. That's FITTENTRIM, at Fit and Trim on Twitter. And if you want to throw me some bucks, I'll let you listen to the lines Catfish said that we cut.
Oh.
And
Excellent.
you can hear us next time on
Babylon, Berlin.
Berlin.
Babble.
Babble.
It just rolls off the tongue.
It really does. Sweet Scheisse.
Yeah, so they filmed that elevator. That is a real, not an elevator, what do they call it? A lift that goes around. And of course, the big thing that all the kids try to do is you're supposed to get off at the top floor or the bottom floor. But kids like to, do the Ferris wheel journey through the parts you can't get off on. They say that's the big kick, the big thrill over there in Germany with those kids.
Yeah, what was it? Charlie Chaplin was the one who started all that?